Hola y bienvenidos al Jardín Botánico de Missouri. Soy William Farfán Ríos, investigador
Hello
postdoctoral.
and welcome to the Missouri Botanical Garden. I am William Farfan and your host and moderator for the Spanish language talks in the 10-part series Bioculture, Plants and People Interacting, organized by William L. Brown Center and made possible by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Each of the 10 talks in this series will explore the ways that plants and people interact through the lens of the Missouri Botanical Gardens Biocultural Collection. The objects in this collection, which range from simple carved wooden spoons to complex herbal compounds, are tangible evidence of the ways that plants and people interact. They are a valuable resource for understanding humanity's biocultural heritage and for the conservation of nature itself. They are also a means of preserving traditional knowledge, documenting livelihoods, and showing the lasting influence of ethnobotany on the diversity of human cultures. Today's talk will last 30 minutes with a 20-minute presentation and time at the end for Q&A. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to use the Q&A function in the box at the bottom of your screen. We will sort through your questions and get to as many of them as possible at the end of the presentation. Today's program will be recorded and posted on the Missouri Botanical Gardens YouTube channel in the coming weeks. We also offer accessibility features, including ASL interpretation for the deaf and hard of hearing, and live captioning, which you can access via the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. To turn off and for more options, click on the closed captioning feature. We respectfully acknowledge that we host this event from the traditional ancestral lands of the Osage Nation, which was historically home to many diverse native peoples who continue to live and work here, particularly when speaking about the interactions of plants and people. We want to honor and express gratitude to the indigenous and local people whose wisdom and innovations have shaped and continue to shape the way in which we engage with the natural world. The William L. Brown Center at the Missouri Botanical Garden is dedicated to the study of useful plants, understanding the relationships between humans, plants, and their environment, and the preservation of traditional knowledge for the benefit of future generations. Each of the talks in this series resonate with the mission, and it makes me especially proud today to introduce Carolina Romero. Carolina Romero is a botanist and taxonomist focused on documenting the biodiversity of the neotropical members of the legume family. Between 2004 and 2007, she worked as an associate curator for the Colombian National Herbarium in Bogota, for which she toured several regional herbaria in Colombia as a visiting curator. In 2012 to 2014, she worked editing and preparing several family treatments for the catalog of the vascular plants of Bolivia. Since 2015, she has been a research specialist for the Brown L. William L. Brown Center of the Missouri Botanical Garden. Thank you, Carolina. You have the floor. Thank you, William, for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. In today's talk, we will take a little trip to the Colombian Amazon region to describe and to tell stories about one of the Ticuna traditional customs based on plants related to two artifacts which are part of the biocultural exhibition at the Botanical Garden. These artifacts show how a plant is used, and they tell a story about the interaction between humans and plants. Today, we are going to deconstruct a ceremonial ethnic tradition using plants, also the manufacturing techniques and some chronics about how they do it. We will see how the use of these plants play an important role in the construction of a traditional costume and also to preserve an ethnic group, a particular ethnic group. So who are the Taikuna people? Taikuna means men who paint themselves black are 40,000 people distributed in the Colombian, Brazilian, and Peruvian Amazon region. One of the cultural traditions that they celebrate is the pelazon ritual. This is the girl's initiation into adult life. This is a special ritual. It is an act that has to do with building taikuna identity and the individual and collective body to keep social relations. This ritual starts when the girl has her first period. Among the ceremonial objects used during the ritual, we have the costumes and masks used by those who dance. Here, this represents the two artifacts that we have in our exhibition. One is a ceremonial costume, and the other one is a scale model of those who dance in the ceremony. Building the costumes is a secret. Only those who make them know how they are made, what is the part of nature that will be represented, and the message that they want to broadcast. These ritual objects put together in different materials called Janchama, which is a type of bark cloth, shows how they work. This determines the person who uses an animal spirit from the jungle. They have the jaguar clan, the monkey clan. And this is really interesting. And this is part of the creation myths of the Taikuna people associated with the jungle and their environment. So let's deconstruct the ceremonial costume. What is Janchama and how do Taikuna obtain this material? Janchama is a fiber from the Amazons. Janchama is based on vegetable fiber from two trees. One is the Janchama tree, and the scientific name is Ficus maxima, and this is a type of fig. This is traditionally used in Mesoamerica to produce paper. Ficus maxima, in other words, the Janchama tree, is located in Mesoamerica, South America, in Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, the Guianas, Venezuela, and also the Greater Antilles. The other species that they use is called nuwiri. The scientific name is Pulsenia armata from the Moraceae family and with a similar distribution. Both species are widely used in the Amazons to build different objects. From Ficus maxima, you get a white janchama. From the other one, you obtain a red material. Other types of trees used are Ficus insipida, Ficus mutisi, that's where you extract the thicker janchama fiber. And according to the Taikuna people, the fiber from the trees offers 10 different types of textures. The thicker material is used for blankets, and the thinner material is used for costumes. The janchama is extracted from mature trees. If you need greater extensions of Janchama for this ceremony that I mentioned, they cut young trees at the base to make sure that the tree will continue to grow. The Janchama harvest can last from 3 to 8 hours, and this includes the time they spend looking for the tree in the jungle. Once they harvest the trunk, they use the peridermis and they use a machete to scratch the external part of the tree. Once they remove this part of the tree, they hit it with they hit it to make it softer, and then they put it in water so that the material is elastic. They use a special type of tree or a palm tree called Brosimum rubescens. They use they heat the material to give it texture. Heating the material is done in a diagonal way, not to break the fiber, which starts coming off the tree. Once they have obtained the material, the artisan makes sure that the cloth is well processed and they wash it. The wash it is done only using water from the river. The cloth is handled with the hands to remove any sticky material. Then they sun dry it out of their homes. The drying process is rather quick. With this, with the ready cloth, now it's time to decorate it. For this, the Taikuna people use vegetable dyes, which are available in the Amazon. So we see that the object represents the environment by using different vegetable materials. To extract the pigments, they use different parts of the plant depending on the species, as we show you in this table, which indicates the extracted color, the scientific name, the Taikunan common names, the part of the plant that was used, and whether it is a cultivated or wild vegetables. They can use fruits, leaves, they heat the vegetable, and they extract the colors used for decorations. To apply the color, the artisan can apply the material directly from the plant, or if they have to do fine work, they use a firi. This is a type of plant that they apply it on the extremes so that they can obtain the result they expect. They, they have old drawings which are represented by geometrical forms, an abstract representation of reality, and modern drawings that represent reality. Now, let's mentally go back to the ceremony. Once these ceremonial artifacts and the food is ready for the ritual, the celebration starts. They play the drums and flutes to tell the community that the ritual will start. Women, family members of the girl, use something called huito to obtain a black pigmentation, and they paint her body to protect her from the spirits of the forest who will bother her at night. She is simply dressed with feathers, with a feather crown. All of this is made with janchama cloth and decorated as I explained. Once the girl is dressed, she comes out with her eyes closed to start the ritual. Once she goes into the maloca, which is the big house where the ceremony will take place. She's presented to community, and women offer food to those who attend. Then the shamans dressed with janchama clothing representing forest spirits, as we see in the pictures. They represent the jaguar, the monkey, other times water, the jungle, or rain, the moon. the sun, the wind. So those who dance, they dance around the child with the rhythm of the drums and the flutes, representing the forces that the girl will have to face as she becomes a woman. After the ceremony, there is a great party. At the end of the afternoon, the girl the girl's hair is cut, and that's why it's called pelazon, which means to shave your head. Then the girl dances around a wheel, then she walks to the river and she has to go into the water. All of the dancing people walk into the river as well. The party continues at the Maloca and they continue dancing and singing for as long as 3 days. Well, this was a brief explanation of the Pelazon ritual showing the material and cultural identity of the Taikuna people in the Amazon and showing some objects that are part of the exhibition at the Botanical Garden. I hope this was a good opportunity to show you one of the many ancestral traditions of the Amazonian people, which are preserved in Colombia. I also recognize the Taikuna people for continuing to preserve their identity, the Luis Ángel Arango Library and the Humboldt Institute for the documents I was able to consult to prepare this talk. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll be happy to hear your questions. Thank you, Carolina. This is a great talk. This is so impressive. The cosmovision of the Taikuna people and that tight relationship they have with plants. Before we start with the Q&A session, please fill out our survey and join us during the next talk on May 11th with one of the curators of the Botanical Garden, that is Carmen Ulloa, who will be presenting in Spanish, Colada Morada, an Ecuadorian tradition of the Day of the Deceased. Don't miss it. As we get the questions in the chat, I have a question, Carolina. You mentioned Ficus maximus, which is one of the trees that they use to put together these costumes. So it comes to mind that ficus, there are many species of ficus. They are very diverse. So how did they pick the Ficus maximus? Are there special plants within Ficus maxima, or do they choose other materials to put together these costumes? Well, that is a great question. Usually they use the maxima versus other types of ficus, but what I was able to read during my research for this talk is that the indigenous people identified the trees based on the bark. They know what is the maxima, what is the skippy, the different types of barks. And depending on where they grow, some species, the maxima grows in flatlands and others grow in flooded areas. They avoid trees that grow in flooded areas because they say that the fiber is not so thick and it's not so flexible. So I didn't find studies that would relate this to morphological characters or aspects, but they identified by the by the type of bark and the place where they grow. They really have a good eye for this. Great, thank you. We have a question from Carmen Ulloa, who will be our speaker for the next seminar. Who chooses the character for the ceremony? The father chooses the artisans who will make the costume. Each one of these artisans They decide on what character they will choose. For example, if the girls clan belongs to the jaguar, they can interpret uh, the opposite clan. But usually, this is something very personal. And as I explained, it's a secret. They say, the father says, I want you to make the costume. And they go into the jungle, they find the fiber, they decide what jungle spirit they want to interpret. So it is something very personal. It depends on the artisan and what the artisan wants to express to the child. We have a question from Robbie Hart. Thank you for this fascinating talk. Could you please talk about the current situation of the Taikuna people? Is this a current tradition? And how have plants changed in the past years? That is a good question. The Taikuna are one of the biggest ethnic groups in the Amazons. If you go to the Amazon region in Colombia, Peru, or Brazil, usually you will find Taikuna people. They do celebrate this ritual, but not in such a traditional way as they used to. Maybe because a lot of tourists go to the Amazons and everyone wants to see one of these traditional dances. In general, they do these ceremonies once a year. If tourists are there, they can be invited, but this is something that is restricted. Something that has changed a lot in the ceremony is that first they are allowing outsiders in the ceremony. The name is shaving ceremony. Before they would pull the girl's hair. Now they use scissors and they cut the hair. Before it was more difficult and it was a process that took a long time. Before the ceremony, the girl has to be isolated from 1 to 6 months inside her house in a room in her house, and only women can visit her. She has a special diet. Now it's not 6 months, it's 15 to 20 days. It's not 6 months anymore. Now, regarding the species, if the question refers to preservation issues in the Amazons, and do they harvest this type of tree for the ceremonies? Let's say that there are no preservation programs, conservation programs. They cut the young trees, they try to pick the right tree, but there is no selective harvest. And I know that because of tourists, a lot of people go to buy these artifacts in the Amazon. So there is a growing demand. They cut more trees, but that is so that they have a bigger income. So this is something negative that we get from tourism. Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Carmen is asking, how many costumes do they make per year? And you just answered that question. Are these species endangered because of this type of extraction? Well, I don't know how many costumes they make per year. What I do know is that The ceremony was for everyone in the tribe. It wasn't just one girl. We could have two, three girls who were having their first period. So they would have a big party for the three girls. So I don't know the number. I would imagine that it's about 10. The thing is that they would burn these costumes after the ceremony. Now they burn them or sell them depending on whether or not there are tourists present. But once the ceremony was over, everything was burnt to get rid of negative influences on the child. But no, I don't know how many exactly. Well, but that's interesting. What you mentioned is interesting because there would be a conflict in their cosmovision. How can they sustainably use this? That's quite interesting. And the other question, are these endangered species? Not endangered, but I know that they extract a lot of them and these trees grow very slowly. I think that if we did other studies, we would find that the trees population has been negatively impacted, not at a big scale, but there has been a negative impact. We have a question from Ana Luisa. You already talked about this, but let's ask this. Well, does the tradition remain or is it a lost tradition? Yes, the tradition remains with some changes, as I said. They don't pull the girl's hair, they don't pull it out, and they allow tourists to come to the ceremony. But the community sense is very strong among Taikuna people. They see themselves as a community and not as individuals. So to them, within the ceremony, it's important to share food, the cassava food that they prepare, the animals they hunt and eat. So that's that helps them to see themselves as a community. And when they share, that strengthens that feeling, even if tourists are present. But yes, things have changed. The tradition remains, but it has changed. We have a question here that reads, how big are the objects that you show in the collection? Well, the ceremonial costume is body size. I am about 5'2", so it's a real size costume. And the other one is about 10 inches tall. And the last question to finish this talk, you said that this is an initiation ritual for girls in the transition to become women. Do they do the same for men, for the boys? As far as I know, they don't have a male transition ritual. I know that boys, since they are very little, they are taught how to hunt and other tasks, but mainly hunting. The girls get this ceremony and they also do other works in the community, but there is no initiation ceremony for boys. Not the way they have it for girls. I believe women, Taikuna women, are seen as life givers. They see that women have a greater responsibility. They see girls as the ones that connect society. They are mothers, and as mothers, they have a huge responsibility because they have traditions to transfer not only to girls, but also to the boys. So maybe that's why women have a greater preponderance. That is so interesting. We are out of time. Again, thank you for this fascinating talk, Carolina. It was phenomenal. And also to learn about these that cultures that are isolated. To the public, please don't miss out the next talk by Dr. Ulloa. We will see you the next time and have a very good afternoon. Thank you.